Attention, school-based dyslexia educators.
Are you tired of juggling prep work and paper materials?
Amplio Reading Intervention is here to give you more time for what matters most, your students.
Amplio offers fully digitized versions of the renowned MTA and Esperanza curricula, making it easier than ever to deliver structured literacy intervention and track progress in real time, all while staying aligned with Texas Dyslexia Handbook standards.
Come join countless districts who are simplifying their dyslexia interventions with Amplio.
Learn more at ampliolearning.com. That's AMPLIO learning.com. Because empowering students starts with empowering educators.
Hi, this is Amy
And Melissa. We are a couple of retired Texas teachers who are CALTs, Certified Academic Language Therapists. We started our own businesses, and now we have a podcast called The Dyslexia Duo.
So join us for our informative podcast, where we'll delve into dyslexia, covering the topics that affect parents, therapists, teachers, practitioners, and anyone who wants to learn more. We'll guide you through everything you need to know, from the first signs to the intricacies of dyslexia curriculum placement and beyond.
This season, we will cover the referral process, what to expect when your child or student is dyslexic, the generational impacts of dyslexia, and how to support those affected.
Come join us. Hey, Melissa.
Hey, Amy.
We just finished a podcast with the president of ALTA. The current sitting president is Michelle Qazi, and the president-elect, Patricia Elkins. We were so lucky to have them on our show.
They're both so knowledgeable and so passionate about helping those with dyslexia. So I was really happy to have that opportunity to speak with them.
Absolutely. And I think it's important that before you jump in, you understand what ALTA is. So ALTA is the Academic Language Therapy Association, and it's a professional organization that provides certification for individuals who work with people who have dyslexia and related learning disabilities.
So ALTA certification process is pretty rigorous. You have to do some coursework with a qualified instructor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. ALTA also requires their members to complete evidence-based coursework in a multisensory structured language education.
They have supervised practicums, and those are supervised by their qualified instructor.
That's
Which
right.
you will also hear us talking as a qualified instructor is a QI,
Mm-hmm.
just FYI.
And we talked about them being supervised by the QI, and you have continuing education. As a member of ALTA, you will continue to gather 10 CEs a year and document and upload that certification.
So there are a professional code of ethics that we all must follow, those of us who are ALTA members. Yes, so there's a professional code of ethics to follow.
And ALTA certification additionally ensures that members have the skills and knowledge to provide high quality services to people with dyslexia. ALTA also provides resources and guidance to the community to promote quality practices in the field of dyslexia. It really is the gold standard.
Yes, and you, as an educator, may want to become an ALTA trained professional after you hear this podcast, because it is wonderful.
It certainly is. So let's tune in and listen to what the Dyslexia Duo and the current ALTA and president-elect
Have to say. Hi, this is Melissa.
and Amy, and we're the
Dyslexia Duo.
So today we have special guests on our show. We have the current ALTA president, and we have the president-elect that's on our show today. So, ladies, go ahead and introduce yourselves. Now, we have a wide audience. We have parents, we have educators, we have practitioners, we have therapists, we have qualified instructors, I mean,
We have
all of us.
researchers.
We
like
have
Dr.
researchers.
Hasbrook.
We have all of us. All of us are on there. So it's a pretty diverse audience. So go ahead and introduce yourselves to everyone.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am Michelle Qazi. I am the current president of Academic Language Therapy Association. I'm just thrilled to be talking about dyslexia and everything that we do. I am coming from Colorado, and it's gorgeous here. If anybody hasn't been here, you guys have to come and visit. And in my day job, I am also the director of literacy for Boulder Valley School District. So I come to it from a public school lens, and just really thrilled to be leading this incredible organization.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, Melissa and Amy, I'm Patricia Elkins, and I live in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I am the president-elect of ALTA. And I have a day job too. I am a dyslexia therapist at Little Rock Christian Academy, which is the largest private school in Arkansas. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done at our school. We have 2 certified academic language therapists, qualified instructors on our staff, as well as 4 CALTs in training. I guess I would say I represent that private school lens and kind of come from that background.
This is really neat. We have 2 different perspectives then, private and public.
That's nice. That is a really nice perspective to have.
Okay, so you told us who you are, and I would wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your CALT training, where you received it. Tell us a little bit more about what took you on that journey, if you could.
So let's see, I received my CALP and CALT and QI training all in at the Colorado Literacy and Learning Center down in Colorado Springs. It is run by Dr. Lynn Fitzhugh, who is just incredible. I used to tell her all the time that I had to go on for my QI because all of the knowledge that was in her brain was not yet in mine. So I needed to keep on studying under her. So I've almost kind of given that up because she's just so incredibly knowledgeable. But what brought me to this journey, actually, I was a public school teacher forever. I've been in education almost 27 years. And I taught in 3rd grade predominantly. I taught a lot of other grades, but mostly 3rd grade. And anybody who's listening who is in the public school or even the private school or even in dyslexia therapy knows when I say 3rd grade, that was a pivotal reason that I got into this. I had my master's in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in literacy, but I had never, ever gotten any coursework in how to teach children how to read. And so being a 3rd grade teacher also, I was like, okay, well, they're going to come to me already knowing how to read. Well, I quickly learned that was not the case. And so through the years, so many kids came through my doors, my classroom doors, that did not know how to read and did not know how to read in a very specific way. And I just was at a loss as to what was happening or even how to help them. And there was one particular student who walked through my doors right before I got into CALP training. And he was just a fascinating case. He had been on an IEP since kindergarten, and here he was in 3rd grade, and he was on an IEP for speech. Nothing academic, just for speech. And so when kids came into my classroom, I did a lot of baseline assessments on them. And I did a writing assessment where I just had kids write. And so when I looked at his, it was just a string of letters. I could kind of tell what he was trying to write. And I was like, wow, okay, what is going on here? When I delved deeper into it, I was like, okay, look at that. There's absolutely no vowels anywhere in any of the words that he is writing. And so I took it to the speech pathologist and I was like, what do you make of this? And just to kind of get some guidance. And anyways, they were like, wow, his handwriting is really not real clear. And I was like, yes. And what else? I was like, do you notice that there's no vowels? And so anyways, we just kind of put our heads together to kind of try and help. And so that just led me down the road of asking questions like, what could be going on? with this student and their learning in literacy. And so I went to just a whole bunch of just workshops, and I was sitting in one workshop at the time, and they were describing a student with dyslexia. And I was like, check, 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 check. I was like, that's what it's been all these years. Through that, I just started to investigate, like, how can I get more training in the area of dyslexia? And that's what brought me to Dr. Lynn Fitzhugh. I lived in Colorado Springs at the time, so luckily, that was just really lucky for me and so many other people that it was right down the street from me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so that's really what brought me in. I then started to work with this student and 4 to 5 other students over the next 3 years. And I'm proud to say that this particular student, and actually a number of the ones, so I'm going to back up a little bit. So I taught all day, and then I had 3 groups after school, and these are all 1 hour long after school. So, and I had a family of my own, but it was just, I had a passion, and I was like, I have to help this kid. And so he ended up going off to middle school reading at grade level.
Wow.
And it was just amazing for him and his family. It's interesting because his dad is the one who used to come and pick him up after therapy. And he started coming earlier and earlier and earlier. And I just pulled him right up to the table. And it was under the guise of, well, let's have you involved in this so that then when he's asking questions at home. So I ended up inadvertently also teaching his dad.
Well, and we know there's such a strong family inheritance, of dyslexia. I tell when I work with trainees, there's the apple in the tree, and they really don't fall that far away from each other. I love how you did that for the dad, though. I really do. I think that was not only a kind gesture, but I think it was incredible that you noticed that and you said, well, here, do this with us so that you can help him work on this at home. I think that was great.
Patricia, do you want to share your story too about how you received your CALT training?
Like Michelle, I have a background in education. I got a bachelor's degree in elementary education and turned right around and got a master's in special education and started out as a high school resource room teacher where I saw lots of students who couldn't read, couldn't write, and I really struggled at that time with knowing what to do with them, but couldn't really find options as to how to do things differently. So I kind of tackled things at that point as teaching them to fill out specific job applications in our community and just helping prepare them for the workforce, because I couldn't really find a different or better way to help them. Then when I had my first child, I stepped back from education and stayed home. And as my daughter came into first grade, she came home. It was right around Christmas. I'll never forget it. And she said, Mommy, how do you know what words to say the first time you read a book? And I said, you just read the words. And she goes, no, how do you know the words? And we kept going back and forth and having this conversation. And I said, you're a great reader. Go get me a book. And she goes, no, I know all of our books. But when it's a new book, how do you know what to do and how to read it? And in reading group, whenever we read, the first time we read something, you can say pass. And I always say pass because I don't know the words, but the next time I know all the words. And she was memorizing the story. If she heard it once, she had memorized it. Wow. And so I kind of quickly started cueing in that something was going on. Things kind of went back and forth for a couple of years. All of this great education that I hadn't really prepared me for recognizing a learning disability, recognizing dyslexia in my own child. And we were just working. We joked that she went to school all day and came home and did homeschool all night. because I was constantly reteaching her and helping her along the way. And around fourth grade, I walked in on Meet the Teacher night, and she had the same teacher my son had when he was in fourth grade. And she mouthed across the room, "I need to see you after." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I had no idea what she was going to say. And she held up a paper that my daughter had completed and said, "Can you read this?" And I said, "No. Can you?"
Mm.
And she said, "No, but if verbally I ask her, she gives me some of the best answers I've ever had a fourth grader give me." And so she said, "I think something's going on." And this was the first time that a teacher was in agreement with me that something wasn't quite right for her. So we got her to an examiner as quickly as we could. And in the meeting, we were asked questions, is there anyone in your family that has difficulty with reading or with spelling? And both my husband and I were like, yes, we know family members that have this difficulty. And the examiner said, well, it could be dyslexia. And that was kind of, I feel like, the very first time I heard that word. So that evaluation, and she came back as being dyslexic and dysgraphic, and also having amazing intellectual ability. Would be, if you had like a gifted and talented program in your school, she would have easily qualified for that. But one of the greatest things that came out of that is our examiner recommended that she see a certified academic language therapist, which there were not very many in my area. And I think I begged the therapist to come to our school early. We will always be there early. We will do whatever it takes. I need you to help my child. And just through that experience of seeing a CALT work with my child and help her, I just made a note to myself that one day I want to learn how to do that. And I want to help other children the way someone helped my child. I want to give that gift back. And training was not in my same town like it was for Michelle. It wasn't even in my state. I drove to Dallas, Texas. So about a 5.5 to 6 hour drive, depending on traffic, and trained at SMU, where I trained in alphabetic phonics and multisensory teaching approach. And then I later retrained in Take Flight, and then did my QI training, Brenda Nolan here in Arkansas in Take Flight.
Wow. Yeah. Both Melissa got her CALT at SMU, and I was training for QI at SMU when we met. So that's kind of how we know it. So I had Jana and Juancita and Michelle and Mimi and the whole gang, right?
It's interesting. It sounds like we all have very similar stories. We were educators, and we were kind of going into the education world thinking we can help kids learn how to read. And we could, for regular classroom students who needed to learn how to read and could read at a normal introduction with the curriculum that was presented to them, things of that nature. But anybody that was outside of that realm, we didn't know what to do to help kids who had any kind of reading disability. And it wasn't until we all were able to go and get trained by all of these experts who trained us that we were able to start being able to produce what we needed to do for these children.
Well, even, I went to school back when Jesus was a boy. And when I got my bachelor's, I had a minor in reading for grades 1 through 8. And it was whole language at the time. I remember getting kids in my setting, and some of them weren't able to read, and I didn't know exactly what to do. So I'd made reading groups, and it was slower and louder. That's all I knew to do was slower and louder, when I'm sure they needed the explicitness of not structured literacy, then maybe even a dyslexia curricula. That is what they needed. Michelle, what curricula? So we heard Patricia was trained in MTA alphabetic phonics and then later retrained in Take Flight. What are your trainings in?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am trained in Take Flight. I also received some training with an OG fellow, Dr. Ron Gashimoto. Gosh, it was long, long time ago. Yeah. So those are predominantly where I'm trained in. I mean, once I got Take Flight training, I was like, yep.
Did you get trained from Dr. Karen Aver?
I got trained from Dr. Lynn Fitzhugh.
And was that at Scottish Rite Hospital?
It was at the Colorado Literacy and Learning Center.
Okay. Got it.
Back in like 2011.
Okay.
So we kind of heard why y'all decided to become a CALT. And Michelle, you kind of talked about a little bit. You touched on that you wanted to get additional information from Lynn Fitzhugh, and that's why you went and got your QI. Are there any additional reasons? I mean, because I would love to sit at the feet of my mentors, and listen to them some more. But did you have anything else you wanted to do with your QI? Did you want to open your own center and go through accreditation or anything like that? Why did you want to become a QI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't go through this training. Well, I do go through a lot of this training just for the knowledge, but right, I did, right, because I was a teacher at the time, and so I thought, okay, great, I will become a QI, and then in the summertime I can make some additional money, right, because most of the training happens in the summer, and that was kind of my thought. But then, sometimes life happens. And it's interesting because once I got my therapy level certification, then all of a sudden I was seen, right, as the expert in the building. And then I was seen as the expert in the school and in the district. And so I stepped out of the classroom per se and became, well, first of all, I decided to go down to kindergarten and teach kindergarten because I was like, I want to be on the ground floor, right? Like I want to start them off ready and just right. And anybody who is a kindergarten teacher, I just bow at them because it really is quite interesting grade level, right? And like you really have to be on it all the time. And so anyways, then I became a literacy interventionist at a Title I school. And from there, then interestingly enough, I stepped out of public education for 5 years and went to work as a dyslexia therapist at Children's Hospital, Colorado. Mm-hmm. And I remember when they called and they said, hey, we have a position and your name keeps floating around. And I was like, at the hospital? Like, you do that? And I had no idea. And I thought, you know what? It's time to step out of public education for just a little while because I wanted to learn the clinical side of dyslexia. And right, I knew that educational side, but I wanted to know all about diagnosing it and really treating it in a therapy session or in a setting. So I worked at being a therapist for all of 6 months, and then the manager of learning services position opened up. And all of the other therapists there were like, you need to apply for that because you know a lot about dyslexia. And so I don't know, I just approached things as like, sure, I'll throw my hat in, but I'm probably not going to get it. Like I've only been here 6 months. And so then when I was the manager of learning services at Children's Hospital, Colorado, I really got to see like how you can affect change in a system. But as I was there, I kept on realizing that the work that is done at Children's Hospital is incredible. Yeah. It really, really is. It's an amazing facility, everything. However, I just really felt like I couldn't make the impact that I wanted to make, right? Because I was only seeing kids maybe twice a week for an hour. If I was lucky, it was, 3 or 4 times a week, if their families can afford that. And so I was like, you know what, I need to go back into public education. And then at that moment, that's when Boulder Valley was like, hey, we're creating a position. And I just really thought like, okay, in a public school system, that's where we can really affect change.
Nice. Very good.
I think I went way off the rails there.
That's okay. I like it. I like going off the rails. I do. Patricia, what was your moment?
I told you I kind of got into being a therapist because I wanted to give back. I wanted to help other families the way someone helped my family. Well, you start doing that, and then what happens? People call you
Yes.
and, and they want the help, and then you're only one person, and there are only so many hours in a day. And so I just kind of started thinking about, well, if I became why and I could help train more therapists, then more children could receive help. I also kind of around that same time got to know a fellow ALTA member, Brenda Nolan. She and I were serving together in leadership for ALTA Arkansas, our local chapter for ALTA. And we were working together, and she was a QI, and she said, hey, I want you to come train as a QI with me. And she didn't have to do a whole lot of talking me into it. I was already seeing that we need more people trained in our state, right? And kind of around that same time, the state of Arkansas was working on getting a grant to train 500 certified academic language therapists in the public schools. So working alongside Brenda and training under her, I was able to be a part of helping train public school teachers to be certified academic language therapists. And I loved my 2 years that I got to work on that project with her. It was phenomenal.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And there's plenty of students that need a CALT, and there's plenty of districts and buildings that need a CALT. I know we're still training people, and back when I first was trained in a dyslexia curriculum in 92. Okay, I was trained in MTA back in 92 because we had Texas dyslexia law in place in 85. And so I did that, but I did not pursue my CALT until 2004 is when I started on that out in lead. And I knew MTA. I knew it inside out. I could pick up a MLI and do it without looking, any MLI. That's how well I knew it. But I wanted to understand why. Why am I saying it like this? Why was it written like this? And that's why I went to go get my CALT. And then later I did retraining, because that's when Take Flight went from, when I received my CALT in 2006, is when it went from draft to publication. And I was doing retraining. And so I was retrained in Take Flight. When I was in my classroom setting, I had another therapist watching me teach. And she goes, Rodenroth, you should become a QI. And I go, no, I don't want to do that, because you have to be the adultiest adult in the room and know all the stuff, right? And I said, I don't think that's me. And so I really thought about it for 2 years before I did it, because you had to have your master's. And at the time I just had my bachelor's. Now you have to have your master's for therapy too. And I really thought about it for 2 years. I knew it was going to be a sacrifice, and I knew it was going to be a lot. And I had to get my family on board with it too, because it took away from your family time. And I think a lot of people, when they're requesting, when they go through therapy, they know it's a commitment, but I don't think they realize the level of commitment that it's harder than getting your master's. It really is. But you have all those supervised practicums that you're providing, and that you're getting that great guidance from a qualified instructor, that has done it for years and years and years. So my soapbox right there. So let's kind of go on. And now I'm the adultiest adult in a lot of rooms, not all the rooms, not today's. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Melissa with Kids First Dyslexia Services. I am excited to share with you my private practice. Kids First Dyslexia Services is a private practice that specializes in dyslexia therapy. Each one-on-one session focuses on instruction specific to your child's needs in a nurturing environment that develops self-esteem, builds confidence, and fosters a sense of accomplishment, resulting in happier kids with higher levels of achievement. We provide a professional, personalized experience always putting the child first. We value the relationships with both our students and parents because strengthening skills and overcoming hurdles to achieve desired goals and success is a team effort. For more information, please visit www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com. That is www.kidsfirstdyslexia.com.
Hi there. This is Amy Rodenroth, owner of Discovery Dyslexia Services. So tell me if any of these situations are familiar to you. Your dyslexia teacher/therapist has suddenly retired unexpectedly, and you do not have the personnel to fill the space. Or you do not have enough trained teachers or therapists for the number of students who have qualified for dyslexia services, and you need a trained teacher or therapist quickly, like yesterday quickly. Or you need a teacher to provide compensatory services, and you do not have anyone that can provide what's needed. Well, what do? I'm going to tell you what you can do. You can call Discovery Dyslexia Services. Discovery Dyslexia Services can help you with your various dyslexia concerns. We have multiple CALTs who can provide virtual small group therapy. We can also train your teachers in most dyslexia curricula, either virtually or on site. Just let us know how we can help support you. For more information, go to our website at www.discovereed.com. Let me spell that for you. DYSCOVEREAD.com. I don't know, it's a funny name, but we're providing huge services for our dyslexic population. So keep in mind, Discovery Dyslexia Services, covering all your dyslexia needs. Let's return to the show. So let's talk a little bit about dyslexia. So there's a few definitions with some variations. In your words, what is dyslexia?
Yeah, there are a few definitions, but really, I don't know. The one that is most prevalent, right, is the one that was created in 2002 by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, right? That's the one that is most often used. And I mean, it's used by researchers, it's used by educators, it's used by therapists. And so I think I lean on that one the most. But really, in my own words, dyslexia is a brain-based learning disability, right? That is really focused on how we process language in order to be able to, read and spell. I tell families all the time, it's funny when some come up and they're like, oh yeah, I had a little dyslexia. And they're like, sometimes I would get letters confused. And so I'm like, okay, so it's not that a student with dyslexia sees the letters any differently. It's just how they process them. And so it's in that processing part for a dyslexic brain. And I'm not going to even try and go down the road of all the brain research, but to make it super simple, in a dyslexic brain, right, they use the part of the brain that is not the most efficient for reading and spelling. And so the programs, right, that we are trained in and all of the knowledge that we gain from going through all of this training actually reprograms the brain, and it changes it, and so that it is more efficient when they're reading, and it makes it more automatic.
Patricia, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that definition, or pretty much agree with all of that?
I agree with everything that Michelle just said. And, it's something that you inherit. It runs in your family. One of the first questions when we kind of see something at school going on with the child, one of the first questions I ask mom and dad, hey, did any of your siblings, did grandma, grandpa, anybody have trouble learning to read? Do they have trouble with spelling today? It has just that highly inheritable factor with it, right? And I even kind of talk to the kids about it, that, it's something you inherit, like someone has brown eyes or blue eyes, you're tall or you're short, your brain learns to read easily, or it takes you a little more work to learn how to do it. And I even compare it to being an athlete. Like, I'll say Mrs. Elkins is not athletic. If I want to do anything in any type of sport, I have to work really, really hard at it. And that's how our brain is. There are some things that our brain learns to do easily, and then other things that we just have to work harder at.
I have a question and or statement and wondered if you guys could give your feedback. In the years that I've been working with kids with dyslexia, I have wondered and pondered if some of this is also an integration disorder to some extent. Just the integration of the sounds and the language in the brain trying to communicate together. If that was some of the deficits. I saw a continuing education course that I loved so much. It was with Dr. Lucker. He's a speech language pathologist, and he talked a lot about auditory processing and, how there's an auditory processing integration disorder, and sometimes kids with dyslexia fall within this. And I just wondered if you guys had any input on if you feel like you see any kind of integration disorders that might bleed over into dyslexia, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Right. I mean, I think when you were talking about auditory processing, right, integration disorder, right, I will say that when I was at Children's Hospital and we worked alongside the speech language pathologists, because a lot of times kids were diagnosed with multiple things.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we found, and this doesn't mean it's true for everything, but oftentimes when people came in and were concerned about auditory processing, when we did the diagnoses, we did all of the assessments that are required for both, most of the time, like I would say 9 out of 10 times, came out as dyslexia. So I've often wondered, like, is auditory processing just dyslexia? Or are they both just so similar that they can both present very similarly?
Yeah, or if it's just that integration of the two pieces. It is very fascinating.
Yeah.
Patricia, do you have a weigh in on that as well?
I really haven't thought as deeply on this as you have, but I do come across children that have both a diagnosis of auditory processing disorder and dyslexia. It just seems that those children have, the ones I've come across, that phonological processing piece is just more difficult for them. That as a therapist, I have to spend a lot more time in that area to help them with being able to process those sounds within words. They oftentimes have difficulty breaking the sounds apart, especially those consonant blends. They also will be my same kiddos that they can say every sound in a word. They can even do that sustained blending, at, and then they can't come up with the word cat. So that's kind of just the real life application part of it that I've seen when I've had children that have had a diagnosis in both of those areas. Have you seen that as well?
I see a lot of those types of behaviors. I don't have a lot of students who technically have an auditory processing diagnosis. I've talked to some of my students' parents about a concern about auditory processing when I see those types of behaviors. When I see that it's a little bit more than just the reading piece, that there is that inability to kind of connect all of the sounds and the letters and everything all together all at one time.
Well, dyslexia and the comorbidities for everything else, it seems like it's almost like a complicated little Venn diagram, and which is what, and there's so much overlap with the comorbidities.
Yeah. So I guess with us talking about that a little bit, I just wondered if you guys do you feel like there would be any change to the definition and identification of dyslexia over the last few years? If you feel like that's something coming up. I know when we spoke with Dr. Hasbrook, she was talking how they are getting together to try to maybe redefine the diagnosis because it is 20 years old now. And if you guys were able to be on that committee, What would you add to it if you could?
The definition?
The definition, yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I have heard, right, there's been a couple of times throughout the past, 20 years, right, that it has come up like, oh, let's look at changing the definition. And each time they've always come, no, this is a pretty comprehensive definition, right? And so it's interesting. I know that there is some work in an alternate definition as well coming out of Yale University, right, with
Yeah.
Shawitz's.
Yeah.
And I believe that their definition was actually codified into law, right, at the federal level. However, right, I don't know, the one that most people use is still that other one, right, that initial one from like I said, the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. And so I don't know. I think it's really very comprehensive, honestly. I mean, it hits all of the pieces. It talks about, right, the language and how, there's secondary consequences, right? Our reading comprehension and also different language implications. And so it would be interesting, right? I mean, I would have to really, really sit down and think about it a whole lot because I really feel like that one is just so comprehensive, right? And so over the last couple of years also, I think, there's a reason that the definition hasn't changed that much, but how we address it and how we put that definition into practice, I think has had change. There's been a lot of change in that area with just so much more knowledge even about dyslexia. And also in how states are now passing legislation. I'm a little bit jealous of the states that do have legislation because in Colorado, we're still kind of struggling with that a little bit. And then that in turn is how schools are now responding. I think that those things have changed, but that has all come from that definition, right? And it's not necessarily a change in the definition, just a change in our understanding of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Dr. Heisberg even said that she goes, we're coming together, we're talking about the definition, but nothing may come of it, that it may be just kind of standing where it is still. It still has a lot of weight and a lot of merit to the way it is written currently. So we've got the ALTA presidents here, y'all. And so I think it's a good time to bring up, what is ALTA? As a young teacher, because I was trained, like I told you, when God was a boy, I was trained a long time ago, and I used to go to the ALTA conferences because they were mostly in North Central Texas. So they were really easy to go to back then. And now they're everywhere. And I would love to travel, but I just don't always have the ability to travel outside of Texas and do that. But let's talk a little bit about what ALTA is. Can you provide some history, y'all, on what ALTA is?
How much time do we have? Right?
As much as you want.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, a couple of, was it weeks ago? Was it months ago? I actually met with the founder of ALTA, Jamie Williams, who is just amazing. She actually founded ALTA in 1986, believe it or not. And it just kind of came together to, really ensure that the people who are sitting in front of students or even adults who are struggling to read because of some sort of language-based learning disability, that they have the knowledge and really the proper credentialing, right, came from that, right, to ensure that you have the knowledge to be able to do that and do the best for that person, that kid that you're sitting in front of. And so I feel like ALTA is really, it's just, it's a professional international organization, actually, because we do have members in a couple of other countries outside of the United States. And it just really ensures that national certification, that people who attain that national certification have the rigorous training in order to be able to really just do the best that they can for the students that they're serving.
Just one of the things I thought that I would bring up is ALTA has a journal called Journal of Academic Language Therapy. And in the journal, there's a great article that Lynn Fitzhugh wrote that's called the Academic Language Therapy Association, A Brief History. And it really goes through the procedures and even and processes, breaks it down into different decades, kind of what happened. But, it all started in Texas. And from reading the article, that early therapists in Texas were trained by Texas Scottish Rite or Dean Learning Center. And these two groups of therapists came together and decided, that they needed to have an organization, and looked at, it could be a 501c3, which would be like a charitable foundation that people give money to, and then the foundation does something with the money. Or they could put together a professional credentialing organization, which is a different tax number, a 501c6. And I'm not an accountant, so don't ask me questions here, but my understanding of a 501c6 is that is an organization for professionals to be members of, and that you have to do some special training or sit for an exam to become a part of an organization like this. Other similar organizations would be the American Bar Association, which is for attorneys, or like the American Dental Association, the ADA. Whenever you brush your teeth, like it'll say, oh, ADA recommended, you're using a good toothpaste or brush, either one, that the ADA has recommended it. So we are that type of organization, an organization of professionals. And just like Michelle said, that the goal was to recognize dyslexia therapy as a specialized educational discipline. So I love that article. It talks about when the first exam, how long it took for them to work on it. Like they started in 89, and it wasn't until 92 that people actually started sitting for the exam. So I found it just a really interesting read, and would recommend that you guys check it out. It's on the ALTA website in the journal.
Thank you for that.
I am totally going to check that out. I had lots of questions about that. Along with, what is ALTA, the history of ALTA, who can become an ALTA member besides therapists? Can parents, can community members, who can become a member of ALTA?
So you do have to go through the training, right? And so classroom teachers, administrators, when I was in training, we had a number of parents actually who were in the training, and mainly because they were like, I can't afford to send my kid to this therapy, so I'm going to get trained and learn how to do it and do it myself. Right. And so the requirements basically, right, we have different certification levels, but that first one, the CALP, right, the academic language practitioner, has a whole host of requirements, but you just need a bachelor's degree by the time you finish it, right? It's not a bachelor's degree at the beginning. If you go through that training, right, and you have 45 instructional hours, 60 clinical teaching hours with a practicum, and then 5 demonstration lessons, then you have met the eligibility to sit for the exam. And it is passing the exam that actually gives you the credential. But in order to get to the exam, you have to go through the training.
Right.
So, yeah. So we also have speech language therapists, right, who go through the training. And then, as you said, if you want to become a academic language therapist, right, you have to have those, it goes on, right, those 200 instructional hours, 700 clinical teaching hours with practicum, and then 10 demonstrations, right? You go through that practitioner level training, and everything that you did in the practitioner level training then counts towards that therapy level training, right? So you don't have to have 700 additional hours.
Right.
The only time that comes into play is when you then want to become an instructor, right? And so there's the ICALP, which is an instructor of practitioner level, right? And so then there are requirements there, and it's all on the altaread.org website, right? So, and then of course the QI, which Patricia and I both are, right? Qualified instructors. And so that's qualified instructor of the therapy level. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I think I don't want to say anybody, right? Because I mean, you do have to end up with a bachelor's degree, right? Or a master's degree for the therapy level. But really, people who fulfill that requirement and go through the training, anybody who goes through the training and passes it and then passes those exams can be a member of ALTA.
Awesome.
So basically, to be a CALP, it's a 1-year training program. To
Correct.
be a CALT, it's a 2-year training program. iCalp is an additional year.
Beyond your
And
couch.
QI is an additional year past that. So another. So you're looking at 4 years if you want to do everything from start to finish.
Right. So a QI is actually an additional 2 years because you have to follow one cohort of trainees through their entire program.
Okay.
Right. So through their CALP and their CALT.
So I was one of those people who was grandfathered in as having a CALT without a master's degree because I became a part of the organization beforehand. And now the regulations have changed and you do have to have your master's degree. Most of the reason why I didn't get my master's degree was financial. At the time that I was going through all the training, we were a young family. We just didn't have the money to put me through a master's education program at the time. And then I finished my CALT a little bit later and still didn't have especially at SMU, have the additional funds to pay that extra $10,000 to finish my master's there because that was really expensive. But that's where all my training was. So, it's like, okay, you either finish your training there or you lose it and start over on a master's program. So anyway, my point being, I want to speak for the people like me who are wanting to be a certified academic language therapist, who want to go through the 2 years of training, but don't have the finances to get their master's degree. Can you speak to a little bit about that and where the thought process was with the change in the regulations for ALTA?
Yes, I'm going to try and remember that. And I'm going to rely on Patricia to help me remember exactly where that came about. I know that a group of members, right, came together and really looked at just changing some requirements. And so I believe that the thought process was that at that therapy level, right, we really wanted to kind of stand out as, just a certain level, right, a certain level. And so anyways, it was brought before the board to just kind of decide, should we require this master's degree or not in order to get your CALT certification? Doesn't mean you can't sit for the exam, I don't believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Patricia. Sometimes I get these things mixed up in my brain because you have 5 years after you've completed the training to then get your master's degree. And so it was then voted upon by the board of directors and they felt that it was necessary. And so again, it doesn't mean that you can't take the training, right? It just means you won't get that credential until you have completed that master's degree.
So is it 5 years from when you finish your 2-year therapy training, or is it 5 years from the day you start therapy training to the end?
Oh gosh, I knew you were going to ask that question.
I was writing it down because I was like, that's been asked
all the time.
Yeah.
Right. We get that question all the time. And it's my understanding, and gosh, if I say this and then it's totally wrong, I believe it's from the time that you finish it.
Okay.
Tricia, do you remember? Are you looking on the website?
I was going to talk a little bit about that CALT candidate level too. So I'm glad that came up because.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because you can finish the CALT training and sit for the exam and have that CALT candidate designation. So a CALT C will enjoy the benefits of a full voting member of ALTA for up to 5 years while they pursue a master's degree.
Okay.
So you have 5 years from the time you pass the exam.
Okay, that clears up a lot of questions.
Yep. Thank you, Patricia. And so what Patricia is also saying is that you still have that CALT C credential while you're doing all of this, right? So it's not like you just don't have an additional credential, right? But it's then if you pass that 5-year mark, then you will revert back to being a CALP.
They can't go back out to the institution that they were trained and request an extension. Is that something that's doable?
I'm sure that they probably could, but I mean, right now, what is written in is that you have the 5 years. I always say sometimes life happens for people.
Yeah.
And, sometimes there are some extenuating circumstances. And
Yeah.
so I would say that I know that ALTA, I will not be the president then because it's only a 2-year term. I know that ALTA will then look at the things case by case for some extenuating circumstances.
I was just going to add, like Melissa, you kind of mentioned your situation with finances. There are other situations that people have where they are not going to go back to school and pursue their master's degree. They may be very far along in their career and they really want to become a CALT, have that CALT level of training, but they in no way ever intend on going back to get their master's degree. Does that make sense? Like they feel like they're done with going to college.
Yeah.
That ship has sailed. And so, you can still pursue that therapy level of training and have that CALT C credential, just knowing then after 5 years that you'll drop back to that practitioner level of certification if you don't get your master's. But I just wanted to throw that scenario out because that's one that I've encountered in training.
There's also something to think about. Not every training program, but there are a number of training programs that are embedded in universities. So, for example, the training that I went to is now under Colorado College, and it is embedded in a master's. And so once you go through the CALT training there at that university, you only have to take one additional class to get your master's. And so some QIs and have partnered with universities to be able to do that as well.
That's my dream. I'm working on it. This completes part 1 of our conversation with ALTA executives Michelle Qazi and Patricia Elkins. Join us next week for the conclusion to this interview. Thanks so much for listening. Bye. The Dyslexia Duo podcast hosts are Amy Rodenroth,
Melissa Dean.
Our producer is Greg Rodenroth.
You can find us on Facebook at The Dyslexia Duo.
Email us any questions or comments at thedyslexiaduo@gmail.com.
Awareness is so important. Share this podcast with your friends,
family,
and teachers.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.